Hi, my name is Monica Kretschmer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network, Women of Inspiration Awards, and this is the Women of Inspiration podcast, where we speak with women who lead, inspire, and motivate. Today, we have a very special guest. It is my pleasure to welcome and celebrate Vivian Meraki, our 2025 Woman of Inspiration Health and Wellness recipient. She is also the author of Parenting Through Divorce. Vivian is a powerful advocate for families, a guide for parents navigating emotional complexity, and a woman who's modeling courage, compassion, and grounded strength. Through her work, she helps parents build resilient families by first nurturing their own emotional well-being. Her insights are transforming how families connect, communicate, and grow. Vivian, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. We met last week at Dean Davidson, and I know you flashed those wonderful earrings, but it's a true honor to have you and celebrate. And I cannot wait for an amazing podcast because Lord only knows women and people that are going through divorce need all the help they can get.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I love being here. Thanks for having me.
So, Viviana, I would like to start with, it's always about the story. And
Mm.
I've always said that every woman has a reason or purpose while they start their business or navigate their career. So I'd love you to really share what inspired you to step into this work and become a voice for parents going through divorce.
Yeah. So I think that the best way to say it is that I started the work with Unshakable Parenting from my own pain. And I went through my own divorce. And even though our divorce, we tried to approach it in a mindful way, as amicable as we could, giving it lots of breathing room and time, child first, so that the kids can transition and thrive through it. We still saw some really high anxiety from my kids. The day that I moved out of our matrimonial home and the weeks that followed, I noticed that both of my children at varying points in time, but they both started to gain a crippling anxiety. And it was so bad that they couldn't even let me out of their line of sight. So sometimes even throwing the trash down, like in the hallway, like it was a thing because we'd all, okay, everyone, we got to get our shoes on because I couldn't just run, around the corner. They needed to see me because they were so scared that something bad was going to happen to mommy. So school drop-offs became hard. Transitions between homes became really difficult. And I didn't like, I felt like despite all of my mindful parenting through all the years, I was desperate and I didn't know what to do. So I dove into books and podcasts and courses and, articles. And what I found was not very much resonated, not much was really working. We signed the children up for child therapy. That was supportive, but it's only once a week, 50 minutes. And therapy takes time, right? And I just couldn't help but think that there must be more that I could be doing at home right now to support them. And at the time, the work that I did was as a transformational life coach. I was also certified as a somatic coach. And I actually took a lot of my practices and I converted them into age appropriate practices, exercises, and conversations to support my kids. And I really saw things start to shift. And I saw how they regained their empowerment, their agency, their self trust. The day that my son started telling jokes again, I could hear the belly laughs from them again. I knew we turned a corner. So I just could not help but feel that what I went through, I really wanted to share this knowledge because kids take to somatics really quickly because they haven't been conditioned away from their bodies and their feelings as much as adults like us have. And it's really empowering to teach them how, to understand, like, what's going on in your body. What does anxiety feel like? How do we make choices from that place and also help to transition ourselves back to a place of empowerment or calm or just feeling through what's going on. And it doesn't feel as disarming and scary. So that's what led me to write my book in the end. So that book was Parenting Through Divorce. I'm now working on my next book, which is more of a general parenting book, but a lot of the same principles and deeper insights and some of the myths and lies that we've been told our whole lives that really impact parenting and hold people back. And I ended up pivoting my business and the coaching practice I do around supporting parents as well.
Beautiful. And so, how old were your kids when you got divorced? And what was that? How old are they now?
Yeah, so my kids are now 10 and 7. And my daughter was probably 3, and my son was, I want to say, between 5 and 6 when the process first started. So they were young. And, it took us a number of years to navigate through it. So, and initially it seemed like things were going really good until I moved out of the house. And that was when, you know, more of that anxiety started to set in.
And at that age, too, it's pretty hard for them to really, they're still learning about their feelings, but ask and
Mm-hmm.
know what to ask for. So,
Yeah,
I'd love for you to, share that journey of, I mean, as you're going through your own, changes, significant changes, then to actually step into the moment where you're now going to be sharing that knowledge with someone else. That's another big, big step. And so maybe talk through a little bit about that journey because there's a lot of people that, think that divorce is the end and it's really just the beginning.
it is. It is. Like what comes up for me, and something I say a lot, is you can't give what you don't have. And it sounds really obvious to say it, but most of us have been brought up with this belief that all you need is love, right? Love will solve anything. And we apply it to relationships, we apply it to marriage, we apply it to parenting. And love is a beautiful thing. It can solve a lot of things, can heal a lot of things, but love is not enough. And in relationships, love is not enough because what
Mm,
you need in place, in combination, actually not in place of love, but like in combination with love as a prerequisite to actually having a strong connection, is actually emotional safety. And none of us were taught emotional safety. We weren't taught how to create it. We weren't taught how to feel it. Most of us didn't even experience it. So that's where I start with all of my clients. It's what I started with myself, where I ended up stumbling into it, I should say. But I'll never forget those nights lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering, is this my life for the next 10, 20, 30 years? Am I the side character of everyone else's life? Have I given up on all my hopes and dreams? And I'm just this is it now, But like on the surface, the checklist is all there. Like it looks like I've got it all. I've got the husband, I've got the house, I've got the amazing career, 2 really beautiful children. And as some aunties would say, like, oh, you've got like the boy and the girl, right? Like it's perfect. Everything's picture perfect. But it wasn't because a big piece was missing. And I was the one that was the missing piece because I'd given up so much of myself for this picture perfect scenario, and there wasn't really the ability to bridge that gap. That was the realization of the reckoning, I would say, is no, actually, I'm not okay with this for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I don't want to be just a side character. I want to be the main character of my own life. I'm going to start by making the decisions where it starts looking that way. So it's a lot of healing, I think, for myself.
mm,
And as I went through my healing, it's interesting, like, a year or so ago, I asked my son after, things had settled a lot and we've been out of the divorce and things are really happy, like lots of belly laughs on the regular. And I said, like, how do you feel now after mommy and daddy are divorced now? And he only said one thing. And what he said was, Mommy, you're just so much happier now. You know,
wow.
like that was his observation. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't having to do with him or his sister or my co-parent or any of that. It was actually just, Mommy, you're happier now. And my joy and my happiness gets to spill over onto them. We have these really beautiful experiences, whether they're day to day or, ones that we plan together. And I think that's the thing, is that when we create that safety for ourselves, and safety, that emotional safety isn't just how we feel safe. Like a lot of times we think about the roof over our heads, the, warm bellies in bed kind of thing. But it's that emotional safety where we feel safe enough to show up as who we are, to use our
Mm,
voice, to express, to like what we like, love what we love, express when there's something that's not quite right and that we're respected for it and we're not judged. All of those things. And we don't think about that. And a lot of times parents mean really well, but because we didn't have it modeled for us, and it's not something that we think a lot about, that we actually are undermining some of that safety from our relationships with our children without realizing it. And a lot
Hmm.
of those, aha moments, it's these little tweaks in terms of how we interact with our children in both those big moments, messy moments, and the good moments that really help to create that bond. And that's why I ended up calling my company Unshakable Parenting. It's actually not about being unshakable in the traditional sense, like stoicism. It's unshakable in the sense that you're so firmly rooted in your authenticity and who you are as a parent and that bond that you have with your child in helping them become unshakable, that you're not so easily swayed by external, the need for external validation or recognition or any of those things. Although those things are really nice, but it's not contingent on those things for you to be who you are. So I think ultimately that's why I named it that.
Well, it's like a pillar. Like it's just, unshakable means, you're able to weather whatever storm comes your way. And Lord only knows, as a parent, there are many balls that come from all areas that we have no idea about. And I really love how there is support for parents. I mean, I went through divorce myself, and there were a lot of books that, certainly, um, yeah, I didn't find very many books that I could relate to at all.
Hmm.
Um, but I do want to talk about how your life experiences leading up to this moment where you now go through this big transformation where mommy is the happiest ever. Um, and now you're, leading in such an authentic way where it's almost like, when we talk about our career paths and our journeys, it's like we only see, like 100 meters ahead of us. But even though it's a zigzag journey, that it's all meant to be in line with our bigger purpose. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that journey, with our listeners, of how you kind of that common thread that brought you to this point.
Yeah. So I think that to explain, and actually my own reflection is that I was the child of immigrants. I come from a very stoic culture. I'm Chinese, and we are a very community oriented culture. It's about support of each other, working together, saving face. So you're not going to embarrass someone. And self expression is something that's not necessarily something that is encouraged. Like it was like, oh, if I wanted your opinion, I would have given it to you, kind of thing, right? Like, and hard work, diligence, accolades. Like sometimes the love felt unconditional because it was about your performance and grades and education and all of that. And so, those were things that are necessary. And it's because of the love that I recognize, I can see that my parents loved me, that loved us so much that they wanted to equip us with the tools we need to thrive in life. And thriving means you've got a stable job, you've got the income, and to do that, you need the education, you need the life skills to be able to, so all of that is important and what was really prioritized. But it came at a cost for me. And the cost for me was that I, on the one side, grew up very small. Like I actually sometimes will describe myself as I was the little girl that was so scared that I was one hiding behind the school wall at recess. You know, like I was not the one asking the other kids if I could play with. I was the only Asian girl in my school, like or at
Mm.
least my class. I remember. Like I just remember standing out. I didn't fit in. I looked funny. I smelled different. My food was different. Like all those things. And there's a sense of just wanting to shrink so that you can belong. And that's what I grew up with early days. And as I look at that now, like that was my foundation. That because that's where I came from, I know what it's like to feel
Mm.
small. I know what it's like to be scanning your environment for danger because you're so worried about what rejection might feel like. I know what
Mm.
rejection feels like, all those things. And as I grew up and I found my voice, there's a pivotal moment later in life where my dad actually sent me to Taiwan and I spent a summer there. It was like a cultural exchange program. And so it was all these, it was like Chinese from all around the world that were coming for this cultural exchange. And it was beautiful. I was terrified. Like the first day I arrived, I called home and I'm like, like, I want to come home. Please bring me home. I don't want to be here. And like we had arrived on this campus and it's like so hot. Like the insects are like the size of my head, right? I'm like, oh my God, like this spider, like that spanned the whole like door frame. And I'm like, oh my God, like what have I done?
Take
And
me
my
back to Canada.
bring me back to Canada where the insects are smaller than your hand, right? And I called my dad and I'll never forget what he said, which is, I'll tell you what, give it 3 to 5 days. And if you still feel the same way, then we'll bring you back home. And I was
What
like,
a
okay.
nice dad.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was my rock. He absolutely was. And so that moment, I was like, okay, well, I'm here, you know? And I started to talk to people and to get to know them a little bit. And most people, especially around that age group, like they kind of gravitated towards like-minded people. And so it was almost like a graduated version of high school, but college, kind of college years is all the kids. And, you know, you'd have your jocks and you'd have your Christian crowd and you'd have kind of, you know, like your drama kids and, you know, like just like skaters, like all different ranges of groups. But I was friends with all of them. And I
Mm.
enjoyed spending time with all of them. And I talk with all of them. And what I came away with that experience is, oh, like when I just show up, we're all human. And I just connect to people on an authentic human level. And I am curious about them. I learn about them and we connect. And that's it. That's it.
Mm.
So I think like that was in those formative years really important. And then later on, when I came back, I actually ended up becoming a peer health educator, talking about some really tough topics around health and science, you know, body autonomy, sexual health, like, you know, around the campus. And because of that program, I actually had to go through intensive training around what are my values. Because
Mm.
what the university didn't want is for people to project or judge and then shame and then other people like the students don't feel great or safe. That was my first introduction to emotional safety without recognizing it as emotional safety. And I really had to confront myself and what I had been raised with, what were those values, what had I inherited, that now I do this practice actually with my clients where I talk a lot about it. It's called the sites of shaping and it's looking at, you know, what are those influences that you inherited that you didn't choose or design for yourself, that are at a family level or a community level or organization level or even like larger
A
society level.
cultural level.
Cultural level, exactly. And what are those things? And what do you want to keep? What resonates with you? What's serving you right now? What do you maybe don't want to keep? And what do you think you want to create out of that instead? And it's powerful. So that was, I think, like a really formative experience as well. And then through the years, I ended up moving into, I actually have a degree in biological sciences, which most people are shocked by. That was my Chinese coming out. Like, you know, like you can be a doctor, lawyer, like the list of five, engineer, dentist, you know. I was going to be a doctor because I loved healthcare. But I
And that was
realized,
going to be my question. Like, what did you want to be when you were
yeah.
growing up?
Oh, that's interesting. I actually
Like
wanted to
when
be
you were like, you know, gone away there
7.
and 11, 12, you know,
Yeah.
that early memory of what am I going to be when I grow up? You know, you
You
think
know,
about that when you're young.
yeah, like it changed a lot. Like at one point it was like, I want to be an astronaut so I can explore the space, you know? And at another point it was like, I want to be a teacher because I really like teaching and interacting with kids. I loved kids. And then at another point it was, I wanted to be a doctor. And that evolved into even speech pathology. Like I want to work with children and helping them use their voice, right? And articulate
Mm.
better because they have a hard time, some kids. And in the end, what I found is I entered the health space. Um, I was abysmal. Like my physiology classes, my biochemistry. I've never studied so hard for a course and do terrible. It was the first time in my life that I came to face with this idea that there are some things that you can work your hardest at and you're just not good at it. And maybe that's okay. So
Mm.
anyway, I ended up going into healthcare. I worked in a lot of clinics and hospitals, nursing homes and group homes. I supported people with mental and physical disabilities and challenges, and I burnt out really quickly. And at that time, I decided it's not for me. I think I'm burning out too fast. So I want to do something else to support from behind the scenes. And I moved into strategic communications and later on marketing. So I actually have a master's in intercultural and international communications. I bring that now into my practice in terms of how to communicate, how to create emotional safety through language, a lot of those things. Like I have clients that sometimes will ask me like, let's plan our communication, right? Like in a way that does not activate your co-parent or disrupt in such a way, because when you start
Mm.
to remove the triggers, then there's a lot more ease in the collaboration that becomes possible. So it's interesting how all these threads have come into
Oh my
my
goodness.
career
So that
now. Yeah.
road is windy for
Winding,
you, but
windy.
it all is like leading you to this
Yeah.
one point right now. And I have got to say, your social media is really engaging. Love it.
Thank you.
So when we wrap up this interview, we'll have to make sure that people can follow and follow the journey. But I can, it's just that teaching really screamed at me when you were sharing about, you're a born teacher. And so
Thank you.
that road has led you to this point where you're actually, making an impact in the lives of others, facilitation and teaching.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels right. Like I definitely feel like my last job, I knew that this is the last job. Like
Mm,
I'm getting called into something bigger. And it's interesting because at that time I was working with health tech companies. I'd returned to healthcare. I was often, like the head of the marketing departments or growth or performance, like whatever that like it takes different forms in these companies. I redefined the brands or I launched new brands and, like communities and communication. And I worked closely with doctors and clinicians on supporting people in their mental health. And what I didn't realize at the time was, there's that clinical side of things. And what I brought was, how to connect and bridge to patients.
mm,
And that was such a foundation for me, like working with brands that dealt with ADHD in women, for example, or,
yeah.
like gender affirming care, like really, really sensitive work, or depression and generalized anxiety disorder, like things like this. And so fast forward all this time, like I realized that no, I think that I don't want to be behind the scenes anymore. Actually, I want to have a material and deeper impact on lives that I have more agency in delivering. And that's what led me to coaching. I explored therapy. It didn't feel right for me. I love coaching because there's a forward momentum about what you're creating for the future. It's not just excavating the past. A lot of my work is therapeutic. Things from the past come up, but we're not staying there. Like we're actually not needing to stay there and understand all the different childhood memories, because
No.
what we're doing is we're working with your body and what it remembers and wants to release. So a lot of my clients are really shocked because they're like, oh, like I didn't even have to go into that memory, but my body just created this experience for me. And now it's released and I feel so light and I feel so much more empowered and I feel like that block is gone. So it's really powerful. And I feel like every step has really led me to this point where I'm doing this work now.
So talk to me about a defining moment that was the biggest shift for you. Because I find that a lot of our listeners, I mean, there's lots of listeners that listen to the Woman of Inspiration podcast because they want to be inspired. They're on the path,
Mhm.
but they just need that little nudge. What was
Yeah.
it for you that was just like that aha moment that you're like, okay, this is it. I'm going all in.
I received a nudge. It was with a company I worked with, and I felt that our values are falling out of alignment. And I took some time to meditate and explore, and that the answers just came in. It was like it's time, Vivian. Like you are on the next path soon. So it's time to figure out what that is. And that's when I did a deep dive into research. I started talking to therapy schools, coaching schools, had a lot of different calls. I started to try to understand what is it that I feel called to next. And in the end, it was one conversation with one particular school. And I was like, this is it. I just knew. It's like I'm in. I enrolled right away. And then it was the same thing when I stumbled across somatics. It was actually with a therapist I was working with, and it was just so present to me. I was having breakthrough after breakthrough. It was like, this is so powerful. I want to bring this into my practice. And I was searching for somatic certifications and training. and everything was in person and over, a long period of time, and you had to be there and travel. And I couldn't do that because I was a solo mom with my kids, even though I co-parent. But the weeks I had my kids, I was uncompromising. My kids did not need routine change. They needed me there. So I couldn't do some of those. And in the end, I found a program. It was so beautiful. It spoke to me. And when I looked at when their next enrollment was, it was in like it started in, I think it was 4 days. And I just made it. And I got in. And I was like, I'm in, this is it. And I did it again. So like these things just happen. And then I think the big nudge was actually not a nudge, it was a kick, which is a conversation that as this was happening, um, my boss called me into a meeting, the dreaded meeting, and we started to have a conversation. And it felt really weird, this conversation. And I was and I finally asked, like, are we like, is this a layoff? And they said yes. I was like, okay, let's start there,
Thank you.
right? Like
Thank
so that
you.
so that
Thank you,
we can,
universe.
yeah. And in the end, and it was like, wow, like, okay, like that's right. Like we're gonna kick you out of the nest now. And in the end, the conversation I had with them was, okay, like what is your ideal case scenario? What do you want this to look like? What does transition look like for you? And are you okay if I was gone tomorrow? Would you be able to handle the volume of work I've got? And they said no. So I was like, okay, let's talk about that, right? Like, let's actually transition this like I was transitioning a divorce. Like, how do we do this amicably? How do we kind of like collaborate on this a little bit so it feels more win-win? And that's what we did. So I actually ended up leaving, I think, 2 months later, help them transition, help them set everything up. And it was really smooth. And then I was off. And then at that point, I started to take on clients. I started to build up my practice. I actually just took some time off, started to write my later on write my book, launch the books. I felt called into public speaking. I found a coach. I started doing that. Signed up for a speaking competition. I won that competition. My first time really deeply doing public speaking, and I wasn't, pitching in a marketing presentation or something. It just feels so different. And
Mm-hmm.
I just knew in that moment I stepped on that stage, I belong here. This feels like home. And I just knew that was my path. And so since then, it's just been more, like keep going and the next thing and the next thing and all these things that feel right. I just keep stepping into. And I think that's the thing that becomes, if someone was listening to this right now, I think the thing I would want them to hear is follow the nudge. At first, it starts like a whisper and it's
Mm-hmm.
so quiet. It's just like this like uneasy or like uncomfortable feeling. But the more you follow it, even through the very difficult decisions, sometimes it feels weird. Like it makes no sense logically, but just do one step towards it and it becomes more and more clear. And if you don't, then that uneasy, awful feeling, it keeps knocking. It keeps getting louder until it can't be ignored. And then before you know it, you know, uh, the sky is falling. So sometimes I don't want to be fear
What
mongering.
I really, what I love about hearing this is I've heard and, I've chatted with so many women about, their defining moments and those moments that come to them. And what I can say, there's like a common thread, which is the universe provides something to you at the right time. And so I like to call it flow,
Hmm.
but how do you, and we haven't talked about this before, but I think that we need to go there because I think there's lots of listeners that can relate to this and picking up the signs. Like I'm a sign girl.
Yeah.
I say I am on autopilot. Show me where it is that I'm going. And, now I'm just choosing what I'm going to pick up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I could be going 24 hours a day with the assignments. But what was it for you that that knowing, maybe you can describe a little bit about that because I think it's really important for us to be so fully self-aware that we're just like fully surrendering to the universe and say, I'm here. I've learned my lessons. I'm on a bigger mission. Um, what's my next assignment? So what was that like for you?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to answer that in two ways.
Okay.
And so the one is from a somatic perspective, your body holds so much and it tells you. So I think like the first is that when it's the right thing, it feels expansive. You feel lighter. You feel like you are like it feels good. Like it actually just feels good. And I think energetically your energy is up. Like it feels expansive. Whereas when it isn't the right thing, it feels heavy. it feels constricted and the energy feels constricting. So I think like that's what you feel. And depending on the person, they may feel it in different parts of the body. For me, it's all in the chest and I can really tell in the torso. There's a little bit of kind of like root and sacral because that's
Yeah.
also a place where security and stability. So depending on the issue and what it is, I notice that it shows up in different places. And then the other thing that I'll say is that I'm also a certified human design reader. And I know human design is something that's still it's new, but it's not new, you
Describe
know?
that to me because I'm
Yeah.
curious. How would you
Yeah.
describe that?
So, human design is a system that combines five different ancient systems. It combines astrology, Chinese I Ching, the Kabbalah
Oh,
tree, the chakra system, and quantum physics. And it's this idea that when you're born, or even when you're conceived, and then when you're born, there's those two dates that you have been imprinted with your blueprint. And the
mm,
blueprint is how you show up as your personality to the world. And then also there's the more subconscious side, which is what others perceive you to be. So it's the light and the shadow, what's known and unknown, and those two things that work together. And as part of human design, we talk about energy, we talk about how we show up in the world, the types that we are, our purpose, how that aligns to a purpose, the way that we're meant to be living. And we talk about our authority. And authority is the one I'm thinking of right now. And to answer your question, which is that different people are designed in different ways where you access a different aspect to access your authority in making decisions. So in my case, I am a generator, which means like I'm someone that is like creates my own energy. I've got what we call kind of like a defined sacral center, and I'm also an emotional like I'm an emotional authority, which means that I experience the highs and the lows of emotions, the full
mhm.
range. And because of that, I've got like a really big capacity for it. But sometimes it can also feel really overwhelming. And when it comes to making decisions, I actually need to allow those big waves to calm. So I don't make decisions when I'm really excited and don't make decisions when you're really down. And just wait for the calm to come, and then the truth will reveal itself. And as part of that, because I'm a sacral, it's actually about what feels right as yes, no questions in response to that. So, so instead of like, how do I feel about this? What I ask myself is, do I want to do X? And it's a yes, no. And I can feel it in my body like, I want it, or mm. And when I feel that rejection or the pushback energy of the then I know. So that's another layer that I often will also lean into and bring in. And different people are different designs. I'm actually going to be bringing it back into my practice. I'm in the midst of creating a new program that integrates all these pieces together. Because for the longest time, a lot of the advice I'd received was, oh, like that's a little woo woo, like maybe take it off. I actually took out all of that off my website, but I'm bringing it all back now. So actually, next week, I'm bringing that back. There's going to be really beautiful downloadable charts. I just have to figure out how to connect the back end. But like these reports are like 50 to 80 pages of like dense information for people about their blueprints. But I'm bringing that
Love
back because
it.
I want to make it accessible for people to understand themselves more. So anyway, like that's what human design is. And so I lean on that as well.
I love it. As you know, well, I'm asked several times, what's your birth date? Do you know what time you were born? And I'm like, yep. I asked my mom what time I was born, and you'll never believe this. I said, Mom, what time was I born? And she knew right away. She goes, 5:55 a.m.,
Oh,
February 14th, 1971. And I thought, I see 555s, I see 111s, I see 222s. Like uh, sequences are huge for me. They have been for a
hmm,
very, very long time. But of course, I was born at 5:55. Like
beautiful.
these
Wow.
things are there is no coincidences whatsoever. It's beautiful. So I love
It's
what you're
so
doing. I'm glad
beautiful.
that you're bringing it back because I think that, you know, we as women or people in general, the more that we can tap into, who we are as a human being down to that cellular level and, the world around us. I mean, it's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, some of the work that you're doing. And, of course, I had a different challenge with my marriage and divorce, which got into the court system, which is I mean, it's a whole monster in itself once it gets to that level. But maybe you can share a little bit for those that are listening that, would love to sort of tap into your wisdom of the unshakable parenting. They're going through it. Let's just say they're both parents are in it. They're not, they're on the same roadmap, right? They want the
Mm-hmm.
best for their kids. And so those are the perfect people to work with because they both are able to work on it um, together with the best interests of the kids in mind. Um, so do you also have the people that maybe have a partner that doesn't play by the rules? And what advice would you give to those people that, have to be both parents in one?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of the clients I work with are actually that latter group of people. I think that a lot of times part of the reason we get divorced, and especially in the early days of divorce, the conflicts are a lot more felt. And a lot of times it's because there's a values misalignment, and their approaches are really different, and they're disagreeing a lot of things. So I think that's common, and I think that that's the beauty of the system that I've created is that when you work with your nervous system, when you work with your body, when you work with your intuition and intelligence, and you support your child in theirs. Because one of the things that I hear the most is, I think my other parent or the other parent is talking bad about me, or they're trying to influence the child in a certain way. And what I always say is, you know, we have this instinct where we try to defend right away. And actually, my advice is a little different. My advice is actually, I know you've got an instinct to defend. I would actually take a pause and let's not defend right away. Instead, ask your child the question or validate that. It's like that must have been hard to hear. You know, it's like, so would you like to talk about that? And then what did you think about that? How does that feel for you? Where do you feel that in your body? And then would you like to hear what I think too? And sometimes some of those things are really harsh things, like your mother or father doesn't love you, or they didn't want you and that's why they moved out of the house. You know, hurtful, painful things. And then that gives you then the opportunity of like exploring what's coming up for your child, giving them space. And the reason I suggest that is because what we're trying to teach is actually autonomy and critical thinking and accessing their truth that they know and noticing what's felt in their body so that we can release it. Because whatever they don't release, it's going to stay there and it turns into other things and gets stuck. So, like that little mini process helps you to help them really feel it, release it. And that's something that even like with my children, like there were moments where we had, you know, like we had to release these emotions. And my son's reflection was, whoa, because I was like, how is that? Like, what do you think is meaningful to you about what we just talked about and what just happened? And he's like, well, like when I feel it, I release it. It's
And
gone.
so where does he feel it? He was able
Like
to
so
articulate where he
so
felt
he
it.
was able to, yeah, I actually have that story in my book. I actually happen to have it right here. But there was something that he was working through when he had sadness that he said, and he felt it in his heart. And we kind of put a hand over his heart and we kind of like dove in. It's like, okay, like what do you notice there? You know? And I kind of talk about that story in the book a little bit more. But like as we felt into it and got closer in observing it, he was like, whoa, it's gone. Like
And
it's
how
gone.
old was he at this time when he was feeling it in his heart?
I think he was 7 around
That's
that time.
pretty, that's
Yeah, it's young.
like we think that they have to be old for them to
Yeah.
understand it, but the filter is probably really low where
Yes.
they're able to communicate and tell you exactly what they're feeling. You just have to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And the children are able to feel it and because they haven't been conditioned. And also because when we're feeling somatically, the body shows you. So most people are really astounded. Like I've had clients that said, like, I don't know like how this is gonna go, but I want to try because I've tried other things, it didn't work. And they're always astounded, like, whoa, like what I learned is I actually can tap in. I can actually feel my feelings. I can feel my body. I did like they are shocked that they see like you see a visualization sometimes. Like it's not some people it's visualization. Sometimes they hear something. Some people it's like a more intangible feeling. But no matter what, when people connect with their body, something does happen and they notice it. And it's the noticing that really helps. So that's what's really beautiful about this. And I think that what happens because of it is that it takes pressure off of parents, that we think that we have to protect our children, that we have to equip them. Children must be protected, especially when we're talking about abuse, when we're talking about predators, when we're talking about toxic people. Yes, yes, yes. But in the context where, you know, we can't be there all the time either. And so it's, and in situations where, especially when there's been a legal agreement and it's 50-50 and you're co-parenting, and it's not like a physically like, like unsafe situation, but obviously sometimes there's emotional things that happen. But at the heart of it, it's about teaching them how to adjudicate what's happening and to
Mm,
trust themselves. And something that I say a lot is children learn to trust themselves by us trusting them first. They don't believe the things they're told because they think it's true. They believe it because they don't know that it's not true. So we teach them to adjudicate. And so
mm,
this process is one where we teach our children, we give them the compass instead of the guide, basically. It's like trust their own compass, trust their body, trust their intuition, really feel in what's going on. And by the way, I'm here to support you. And so for parents that are co-parenting with someone where they don't have the aligned values, where it's really like high conflict, medium conflict, any conflict really, this is what's beautiful about it is I actually like what I found is that the book and my work, like this type of work, it supports through very difficult situations and it can be done solo. You actually don't need both parents to be on board. It actually helps to prepare your children for situations where it's very difficult as well and difficult people, difficult personalities. But the key is to help them to notice and then to anchor and then validate your child's truth. And I don't mean, anyway, yeah, I don't want to get into like this whole thing.
Well, I kind of have a question for you about that. Oh gosh, about the high conflict piece. I mean, I have
Yeah.
lots of experience in that area, of course, with my divorce. And, I was a single mom since my son was 7 months old. So there was a seed planted on the other side where it was meant to break me down at every single level. And that happened throughout his entire life. And so, by the time he reached, his teenage years, that seed was planted so firmly on the other side where it was parent alienation, right? And I
Yeah.
haven't even talked about that stuff. So this is something, but what I realized during that process and when I did my own research with parent alienation was that they're little pieces that are so you could never put them in together unless you kind of stack them together because they're just tiny little pieces, but they're consistent and they are there and they're long. They've been
Yeah.
happening for such a long time. And so I guess what I want to ask you about, because through that process, I was researching the amount of kids that were affected by this parent alienation, where there was one parent that was, doing the alienator, was the inhalator, um, and one parent that had no control. And
Hmm.
so, how would you, and there was a lot of parents in that situation. Um, and so I guess my question to you is, how do you prepare a child to go through that when they're being manipulated?
Yeah. This one. So
That's a
I
tough
do.
one. I know, but
That's a,
I
yeah.
have to ask you that because there was like 20,000 people with the same story, just different names of their stories and kids that were affected. And I thought, wow, if you can tap into that, we've got some real progress that can be made for the kids' sake.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge you for sharing that. I know how hard that is. And it's such a painful experience. And for every parent that's going through it, it is
Yeah.
heart-wrenching. I have clients that are that was their situation. And I think that I'm just going to give it just a pause for a moment. Parental alienation, I'm going to name it as manipulation. And it's a form of, I'm
Child
actually,
abuse.
I'm going to use really strong words. Yeah, it's a form of
Yeah, it's a
abuse.
form of child abuse.
It is. Like it is so painful for the child and it really messes them up. So any parent that actually cares for the wellness of their child, if you're a parent that says that you care about the wellness of your child, then parental alienation should be the farthest thing from your mind because it will mess your child up. And your dynamic with your co-parent is yours. Your child has that other parent and will always love them. And when you reject the other parent to your child, you are rejecting half of your child because your child has half of the other parent in them. So like that is what's like like that that's why it's so harmful. And
Mm.
apart from that, it is a mental and emotional, so damaging. I was gonna swear for a moment, but I was like,
You
I'm
can
gonna reach my
swear.
I was gonna be making some. Can I?
Go ahead.
It's a mind fuck. Okay.
It's a mind fuck.
Like it's a
Yeah.
mind and a heart fuck. Like it is awful. And like what you're setting them up for in future relationships, it really messes them up. So I think I want to say that. And what I'm not talking about, I want to just differentiate for a second because sometimes people come to me, especially mindful parents, and they're like, oh, you know, like with questions. Parental alienation is not the same as parental estrangement. So, parental estrangement is where there is a reason why the child does not want to spend time with the other parent because they are emotionally, physically, spiritually, like whatever that is, that they don't feel safe or comfortable with the other parent. That's why they don't want to spend time with them. There's a reason for it. That is estrangement, and there's a reason for it. Alienation is because they have taken steps to manipulate the child to turn them against the other parent. And it is deeply manipulative, it is toxic, and it's so harmful. So
Yeah.
that's the first part. And then to answer your question, like what to do, like this is where, like, it really depends on the age of your child. But what I often suggest is start early if it's possible and having those conversations. Talk about what manipulation is. I've like from a very my daughter is now 7. I taught her what Darvo is. Darvo is what toxic people use. It stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim offender. And it is a manipulation tactic where you try to address a boundary or something that hurt you, something that you want to address in the relationships that's not working for you. And then the other person suddenly denies, I didn't do that. What are you talking about? Attacks? Well, remember when you did such and such, or I only did that because you did this and da 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 da. And then reverse victim offender. Before you know it, it's like, well, you shouldn't have done that. It really hurt my feelings. I can't believe you even came to me with, like that kind of thing. Reverse victim offender. So now all of a sudden, you're so bewildered sitting here, like, oh, I'm so sorry that I brought that up. Well, they just Darvoed you. Like that is Darvo. And oftentimes, especially with certain personality types, it's par for the course. That is like a normal behavior. And when you equip your child to start noticing and understanding and recognizing it, it can help with a layer of defense. And it's something to talk about. And then they come home and it's almost like a reboot. It's like what's coming up for you? Or like, children, when children ask questions, it's because something was curious for them or didn't
Hmm.
feel right. Like there was a scenario where there's a child that came home and asked about a situation that happened where someone had said something to them and they were kind of laughing about it. And it's like, oh, it seemed like a joke. And then there was a conversation with the parent. Well, that's actually really good. And the parent's like, yeah, like maybe it wasn't a big deal. It's like, actually, the fact that your child came with this, even though they were laughing about it, it was a big deal because they're actually confirming with you if they were right to feel that it was off. And that's why they asked. So it's really great that you had the conversation with them because it was off. So
Mm.
teaching our children about that, about like sometimes we think that it's too complicated for the kids, but actually isn't. Like we're not talking about 3 year olds or 4 year olds. I think that they have to be a certain age, like probably 6 or 7. But you can start talking
Hmm.
about it. And what a great tool that you can use is actually, I use anime. So like I will actually use like animation films. And we'll talk about, or, like if your kids are watching Marvel, I mean, age appropriate. Like I know it depends on the ratings and the family and, but what you're watching. But At the age at which you are starting to watch some of those things, like talk about it, talk about the villains, talk about what's happening, talk about the conversations. How, oh, did you just notice that part? Did you notice what they just tried to do there? Use media, talk about stories and books and, things like that, and use that. You don't have to talk about your co-parent. You can talk about it in terms of media, in terms of other experiences, or a teacher, like maybe they come home, it's like, oh, my teacher, this and this happened. This is not about vilifying teachers, but there are, like, I'm just talking about adults where they may have been in an
Yeah.
interaction where it didn't feel good for them. And we can talk about those things like, oh, like what didn't feel good about that? Oh, that makes sense. Or, like that sounds like that wouldn't feel good for me either. And, like what is manipulation? And like I'll actually go through and sometimes like pause a film and say to my children, like, oh, did you notice that? Like, what do you think that's called? And they're both like manipulation. So I think those are the things, but teaching them and equipping them with the tools to start recognizing, I think is really important. And then aside from that, it's almost like as these things are happening, having the conversations and just making sure that you're creating that space and safety that they feel that they can come to you. So what that looks like is in conversation, you're asking questions, but like one of the tricks that I teach parents is when you ask questions, use what instead of why. Because in all these concepts that
Give me
I
an example of a
yeah,
what instead of a why.
I'll give you an example. So the idea is that we want to remove judgment. We want to remove this idea that maybe I did something wrong with this. So I'll use a really, really even just everyday example. Glass of water or milk gets spilled. It's like, why did you do that? Versus, oh, like what happened? Like it's very different. Or um, one sibling pushed the other sibling over. Same thing. It's like, why did that happen? Versus, oh, or why did you think that way? Or why did you think it was okay to do that? Right? Like instead, it's like, what led you to that decision? Or
What prompted you to push them off the
exactly.
push them?
Like, tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. So,
Tell me
what
what happened.
encourages curiosity in describing and what introduces judgment?
Mm,
Or did I say that right? Why? Sorry, I meant to say why introduces judgment. And that's and people kind of just notice like you almost get your back up a little bit when you ask why versus when you ask a what question.
lovely. The whys and the whats.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole other layer to this parenting conversation and work that you're doing that could really arm parents before there's any problems, just about their own emotional intelligence that gets far past that you don't realize that you need to have in place until it's too late almost, right?
Yeah, and I would like to think that and I recognize like parental alienation is very complicated. It's nuanced. It's a build. The earlier you catch it, the better. And, like my heart goes out to the people who are experiencing it because it's so heart-wrenching when it happens and you feel so at a loss and it's frustrating. It feels hopeless sometimes and you just feel like what's that word I'm looking for? It's like what can I do, right? Like what can I do? And at the heart of it, it's create as much emotional safety as possible and as much as possible if there's opportunities for connection, but each moment of connection needs to feel safe.
Safe.
And
Yep.
that's why, like, respecting your child's agency, even though you know what's happening, even though you know it's the result of all this alienation and manipulation, still it's respecting, like, you know, like, do you mind, like, can I take you out for lunch? Like, can we have this conversation? Do you mind if I give you an observation? Or do you mind if I share my perspective on it? Like, those kind of things before we just jump in create safety. And over time, you know, there's no guarantees, but over time, the child comes into their own critical thinking and reflection and learning, and hopefully their own healing, and they start to understand more of what happened. It's just unfortunate that so much time passes. And I
Mm.
think that's what's so painful as well. And just
Yeah.
knowing that there isn't necessarily a guarantee. But you can definitely do as much as you can, which is, what I talked about is how much connection can you create and how much safety and every opportunity. Like the way I sometimes describe it to my clients is it's like imagine you've got a thread and you just connect it to your child and then the next
Mm.
one and the next one. It's in the everyday moments, moments of
Every single
safety.
consistent
Every
daily
single,
motion.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. That consistency. And before you know it, you've got a rope and then you've got a trunk and it gets bigger. But every micro moment matters. So don't overlook them. They don't have to be these grand gestures or big conversations, like those little things, those little signals of love, the little signals of safety. Safety is the precursor for love being received and understood. So you can't have connection without safety. That's why safety is so important.
Beautiful. And so, yeah, I hope that chapter is in your new book because anybody going through divorce, I think people just need to be aware of it. And whether it's happening or not, it's a great, great opportunity to build that emotional trust and self-awareness with your kids
Yeah.
because it's kind of hard to get it when it's been going on for so long. But anyways,
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a whole market for you. Like I'll give you the link. You need to dive in there and just be a fly on the wall. It's heart-wrenching to see these relationships with their parents and kids. And thank goodness that you are doing the work that you're doing because that is really, it's saving lives.
Thank you.
So I would like to talk a little bit about, I'd like to sort of sorry, I now have my son's dog.
I
Bentley
think I
is
saw a head. Oh, so
in the
cute.
picture now. He's
Oh.
like he says, is that my cue to come and say hi? I would like to talk a little bit about, you're an expert in your industry and you're really creating some space for people to get through some really tough times in their life. So thank you for that. But I want to talk about that stepping into the spotlight piece.
Hmm.
And, I've had hundreds of conversations with women, of course, like celebrating their successes. And so, how does it feel to be recognized as a woman of inspiration? That's my first question. And, has that always been comfortable to step into that spotlight?
Yeah. So I might answer it in reverse because actually I think the significance of the award is tied to my answer for the second question you had, which was it was never comfortable. I was the girl who hid. I was behind the school wall, in the washroom, in the corner of the classroom. I didn't speak. I was punished for speaking. And, eh, you know, what something that I've said recently um, in one of my social media posts was that what people don't talk about as you step into your path as an entrepreneur. So, like we talk about how and you end up having to wear a lot of different hats and all of that. But something we don't talk about is how confronting it is. And that visibility actually is hard because what it does is, especially when you are your brand, it also illuminates all your flaws, all the things that we're trying to hide, you're trying to curate. And it really is confronting in having you really face those things. And I think that's number one is part of this healing has actually been just embracing and accepting myself, what I perceive to be flaws and all.
Mm.
Like the fact that I was so insecure, that I had social anxiety, all those things, like I didn't want anyone to know. Most people think I'm an extrovert, like, oh, she's like the life of the party. What are you talking about? Communications major. You talk good, like what do you mean? But actually it was crippling. I also had that crippling anxiety,
Mm.
that stayed with me quite late in life. And it's taken a lot to heal it. And so I think that especially with the path that I'm on now, where I'm talking on stages, I'm regularly on national television, I'm taking stages, like I'm really publicly trying to stand out to share this message because even if it impacts one life, that's worth it.
Mm.
And this award means so much to me because it's a full circle moment of me being the little girl that I used to be, the one who wasn't seen or wasn't heard, that grew up holding so much of what was my own pain that I was so scared to show. And now I'm stepping out and talking about that pain, talking about what it felt like, talking about how hard it was, with due respect and honor to my parents who only knew what they knew, to the teachers that only knew what they knew, right? Like the systems were different, like the priorities were different. And
Yeah.
what was best was a different kind of resilience, it was stoic resilience. And they were doing the best they could. So, but now I know different. I'm creating a program that's very different. And I'm standing in my own voice now and trying to help families do the same and find theirs. So I feel like this recognition has really strengthened my own mission and my purpose that I am devoting my life to from now on. It's like I am helping parents return to the original self they were before the conditioning happened so that they can raise their children who feel safe and connected and emotionally grounded and to reduce the amount of conditioning that they go through. Everyone's going to have conditioning. It's not about being perfect, but it's about being really present and it's about being connected and lifting each other up. So if one family feels more empowered, if one parent goes, "Oh, like my kids are proud of like are proud of me and are lucky to have me as a parent." And we're not disparaging ourselves for what we can't do, but rather celebrating ourselves for who we've become, then that's the work. And I've done it. So this award means so much to me because it means like it's being seen and validated that this is important. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, congratulations again. You are a woman of inspiration, and you are on purpose with your message and your impact that you're making. So I look forward to being on this journey with you. And to the listeners, um, how can they get a hold of you, Viviana, to really engage with you, learn more about your work and follow your journey?
Yeah, so I am on a lot of social channels. The best way to get a hold of me is probably through Instagram. I'm at Vivian Meraki, Vivian. Meraki is spelled Meraki. And I'm also on YouTube. I'm going to be putting longer form content up YouTube very, very soon. And then my website is vivianmeraki.com. They can sign up for my newsletter. I talk about parenting insights all the time, give updates on what's going on. And my next book is coming. So I'm working on a book now for parents and talking about, dispelling some of these lies and myths that we hold that are holding us back. So that's coming, probably 2026.
Beautiful. Well, I can see the future raveling really beautiful things for you, Vivian. And thank you so much for sharing your career path and your journey and some really great insights. I know that it's been a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to continue to celebrate you. And listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, I am going to invite you to subscribe and share widely. Send it to any parent that is going through divorce. Send it to any person that you feel needs to hear this message. And this is how we inspire change. Is we share those conversations and we share the leadership journey with the women that are inspiring change in the world. So thank you so much, Vivian. It's been a pleasure, and once again, congratulations on your Woman of Inspiration 2025 Health and Wellness Award.
Thank you so much, Monica. I'm so glad we met. Thank you for the award as well.